Hey there guys, I'm Renee. I am the owner and artist behind Chicly Reclaimed Decor, and welcome back to another tutorial. Today we're going to be going over how I crafted these fun seashell and terrazzo trinket trays with a Valentine's Day inspired color palette. For this project, we'll be using eco resin, similar to Jesmonite, and we'll be going over how to make your own colored terrazzo chips, and then I'll be sharing how I combined them with seashells to create these fun and one-of-a-kind designs. One black version and one white. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in learning, stick around, because that's what I will be going over today. But before we begin, please do like and subscribe to my channel so you can be notified when I upload new tutorials. Okay, so for this first half of the video, we are going to be going over how to make the terrazzo chips. So you're going to need to spread out your eco resin onto something to dry out. So I am going to be using parchment paper here, and I'm just laying this down flat on my countertop. You can also use wax paper. I've also seen people use aluminum foil. This set in stone eco resin is measured by weight, so you will need a scale in order to work with this product. And it's a 3-to-1 ratio, so 3 parts powder, 1 part water. And don't worry, it's much easier than it sounds. So I'm gonna have 2 containers here, one to measure out the powder and then one to measure out the water. I'm gonna start here with the powder, and it's super important to zero out your scale before you calculate your measurements. So that way the weight of your cup or your bowl or whatever you're using won't be calculated into the weight of your product. As you can see, this is a fine powder, but you do not necessarily need to work in a controlled environment because it is not hazardous to your health or your skin. But I do recommend working in a well-ventilated area or wearing a dust mask. And if you have sensitive skin, I recommend wearing a nice little pair of gloves. Now that I have my powder all measured out, I'm going to follow the same process to zero out the scale before measuring out the water side of things. Once I have both the powder and the water already pre-measured, I'm simply going to start by adding the powder to the water and mixing thoroughly. In this part of the tutorial, I'm not giving any specific amounts as to the water and the eco resin, because how much you mix is going to be dependent on how many of these chips you want to create. But a good rule of thumb to calculate your base powder amount is simply to multiply the weight of the water by 3. I'm going to be making 2 different colored chips. I want one more dark pink and one more light, so I'm putting a little bit in each cup here. And now I'm going to go about the process of adding my pigment. Now this is a pigment by Trinket paint. This is a heavily concentrated pigment, and I'm just going to add a couple drops here and mix it thoroughly. And if you're curious as to any of these pigments or this set in stone product that I'm using here today, be sure to check down in the listing. I'm going to put a link for where you can find set in stone at 10% off, and also a link for the Trinket pigments as well. And as you can see here, I'm just following that exact same process, but I added just a bit more of the pigment this time to make it a little bit more vibrant for that pink color. And one thing that is definitely worth mentioning is that this product has a longer working time than Jesmonite, so you can take your time a little bit when you're mixing these colors. And what you need to do from here is I'm simply just going to be pouring these 2 colors onto that prepared parchment paper that I have out. Now, during this part, as you may have noticed, this product is not as thick as Jesmonite, so you don't need to spread it as much as you would with that product. It kind of spreads out a little bit for you. You want your terrazzo chips to be thick enough so that they hold their shape, and that way they don't crumble and turn into dust, because that could create problems with your pour later on down the road. I personally like to wait about 12 hours to give this eco resin just enough time to dry, but not enough to where it's fully cured. So it's not too difficult to break these up into chips, and I'm just doing so, creating some big and some small to create a nice variety. If you're finding it too difficult to do with your hands, you can always cover the eco resin with a towel or some more parchment and just gently tap it with a hammer to break it up. Okay guys, so this is where the fun part of the video begins. We're going to be layering these terrazzo chips that we just made with these seashells. I got these off of Amazon, and I also picked up this little tray there as well. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be layering the chips on the bottom of my tray first. And then I'm going to be coming through and I'm going to be layering some seashells in amongst that as well. During this part of the project, you can use your own discretion as to how many chips and seashells you want to add. For this one in particular, I really wanted it to be heavy on both the chips and the seashells. You can see here that there's a difference between this tray that I created on the left and this tray that I'm creating right here on the right. And this is the final photo here. So don't be afraid to experiment and try different patterns. You never know which one you're going to like more. But don't forget to layer some of your chips and seashells on the rim of your tray as well. Once you have your tray set up just the way you want it, you are ready to start your pour. I followed the same exact steps as earlier to create a 3-to-1 ratio. I mixed 6.3 ounces of powder with 2.1 ounces of water, and I stirred it thoroughly until there was no longer any chunks or powder showing. As I was talking about earlier, I really wanted these trays to be really visually striking when it came to both the chips and the seashells. So I went about the process of adding a little bit of extra to my resin before I poured it into my tray. Now keep in mind that this is a personal preference. I have just found that by layering both my tray and my eco resin with a few extra chips prevents them from getting lost in the pour and gives me the look that I want. Once you're done pouring, you simply have to remove any air bubbles by gently tapping on the sides of your silicone mold. We're going to go ahead and set this one aside, and I'm going to share with you the process of how I used Unicorn Art's squid ink with liquid pigments to color this eco resin to create the black version. I followed the same process that I stipulated earlier to mix up this eco resin, and now I'm simply going to be adding 1 to 2 tablespoons of this black pigment called Squid Ink by Unicorn Art. I'm going to stir this thoroughly, and then again I'm going to add just a few of those Terrazzo chips into this eco resin before pouring it into my mold. Okay guys, so the next step is we are going to demold these trays. Now I live in Montana and we have had a heck of a winter storm in the last week, so there's a lot of humidity in the air. So I waited about 12 to 24 hours before coming back to demold these from the silicone. For this process, I like to start by loosening the sides here, and then I will turn the tray over and I will grab the little cross section here and lift from the side and pull up on that part, and then slowly but surely the mold will lift off. The next part of the process is probably my favorite because you really get to see your true design come to fruition. So what we are going to be doing is we are going to be wet sanding. So I'm going to be starting with an 80 grit piece of sandpaper, and I have sprayed my tray down with some water, and I'm just going about the process of sanding the top of this down. And don't forget to get the bottom and the sides as well. And I know it's hard to see right now, but stick around here in just a minute. I'm going to wipe this back, and you're going to see the beautiful design and pattern that we've come up with. Once I have thoroughly sanded this piece down using the 80 grit sandpaper, I'm going to come back and use a 120 grit, and then eventually I'll use a 220 so I can get that nice smooth finish. For the last step in this eco resin art project, we need to seal these trays. You can use a polyurethane or a varnish. I'm going to be using this all natural wax by Set in Stone. It not only seals the porous surface on your eco resin art, but it has an amazing lemon scent to it. So it's quite enjoyable to work with as well. For this part of the project, I'm using a brush that I only use for applying wax, and then I'm going to take a nice microfiber and I'm going to buff the surface when I'm done with that. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Again, my name is Renee. I am the owner and artist behind Chicly Reclaimed Decor. And if you liked today's tutorial and you're interested in more DIY content, then please do subscribe to my channel so you can be notified when I upload new tutorials. And if you'd like to further support my work as an artist, I'd so appreciate you stopping by my Etsy shop, Chicly Reclaimed Decor, and having a look at all my artistically refinished furniture and home decor. But most of all, today, I hope I've inspired you to do a little creating of your very own.